For those of you who don't know me, my name is Will Nelson. I'm a planner for the county. I've been with the county for almost 25 years, and I started doing current planning for about a decade and a half, and now I do long range planning. So that's basically the county's land use policy side. So I am the project manager for Envision Contra Costa. So it was mentioned the update to the county general plan, zoning code, climate action plan, and urban limit line. The first two parts of that are already wrapped up. We adopted the new general plan and climate action and adaptation plan in November of 2024, and we're continuing with the zoning code update. And now we have Measure A. So I'm going to go into the slideshow. It's not incredibly long. Leaving plenty of time for questions. One thing I'm going to say from the outset, though, is that as this is a county-sponsored ballot measure and I am a county employee and officer, I cannot do any advocating for Measure A. So if there are any questions that I feel are getting to a little bit uncomfortable and borderline on that, I'm just going to move on to the next question. So I appreciate everyone understanding that. And with that, I'm going to share my screen and start the
Yeah, this is
presentation.
informational is how we would define this, not
Yeah,
advocacy.
exactly. Exactly. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, I see some
Yeah.
yeses. Okay, then we're going to kick it off here. Oh, whoops, didn't advance it. Are you seeing the all the controls at the top or just the slideshow?
No,
Okay.
just the
O-
slideshow.
Okay, good. All right. It's not advancing it. Give me one second. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I'll start off by introducing everyone to the urban limit line. This is the existing line as it stands today. This is the line that was approved by voters back in 2006 with two adjustments made by the Board of Supervisors since then. The gray area, well, you can see the line. It's the blue line on this map. The gray areas are the areas inside the urban limit line. And so the darker gray, that's the boundaries of the incorporated cities. The lighter gray is unincorporated area inside the line. And then the sort of tannish color is land outside the urban limit line. And this is the county's urban limit line. I should say that the county and all of the 19 cities, we each have an urban limit line. This is the county's line only. So what is the ULL? It is a boundary beyond which no new urban land use designations are supposed to be designated. So in all of our general plans, the cities and the county, we have our land use element, and the land use element has land use designations. This is the list of designations from the county's new general plan. So the column on the left are the urban designations. The column on the right is the non-urban designations. So any of these designations may exist inside the line, but only the designations in the right column should be outside the line. So in other words, your residential uses, commerce, industry, mixed use, all of that is supposed to be inside the urban limit line. Public uses, well, public uses obviously are going to be on both sides of the line, but agriculture, parkland, so our East Bay Regional Parkland, big conservation areas, etc., can be outside the line or would normally be outside the line. They can be inside too, but most of the land outside the line is the column on the right. Here's the new land use map for the county, adopted, as I said, in November of 2024. So this is in the county general plan. And so as you can see, the land uses here pretty closely match the urban limit line map that I just showed you. You see that most of this, the greenish, the earth tone colors, that's the land outside the line. The big blue areas are big public uses like Motco. You see Jersey Island is entirely owned by a sanitary district and it's blue. You see Camp Parks down there in the southern part of the county airports. But the uses, again, in the left column here are your urban uses. A couple of them are at the top of the center column. Those are industrial uses. And then all the rest of it is non-urban. And so, as you see, that those urban uses are almost exclusively inside the urban limit line. There are a couple of legacy places where you have some of those uses outside the line, but they're very few. So the purpose of the line, basically, it shields these areas from the pressure of urban development. And by doing that, it also we contain the footprint of urban development, prevents sprawl, allows for more efficient use of land, less traffic, fewer emissions, more efficient delivery of services. And then it is part of maintaining the 65-35 land preservation standard, which is part of the ballot measure as well. And that standard says that no more than 35% of the county can be devoted to urban land uses, and the remaining 65% uh, is required to be non-urban. A little bit of history. The line is 36 years old. It was originally adopted by voter approval of Measure C back in 1990. It was going to expire in 2010, but it was put on the ballot again in 2006 and extended till the end of this year, hence the need for Measure A. Um, these ballot measures integrate the ULL into the county's general plan and zoning code. To get some of our funding back from the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, some of the funding, the sales tax money that we all pay, the house sales tax, you're required, each jurisdiction is required to have a voter approved ULL. So it's important for the county to have one to retain. It's about $2 million that it gets annually from CCTA. And then it's very rare to move the line. It's only happened 6 times since 1990 and only once as part of a development proposal. So we kicked the process off officially in February 25th, 2025. This is just a very quick summary. We had 3 Board of Supervisors meetings, County Planning Commission meeting. The county's municipal advisory councils were all given the opportunity to review it and conduct hearings. Not all of them did. We met with cities and other public agencies. One city, Brentwood, asked us to come and make a presentation to their city council. We had the CEQA comment period from August to October, and then all the information was on the Envision Contra Costa website. So these next 3 slides are kind of dense, but this is really what Measure A does. And it extends the ordinance, the 65-35 Land Preservation Ordinance, which includes the ULL through the end of 2051, retains that 65-35 standard. We changed the schedule for reviewing the urban limit line to align with housing element cycles. We changed the factors for determining whether land should be located inside or outside the line. These are things like, is it proximate to other development? Is it in a high fire hazard zone? Is it in a flood zone? Those sorts of things. Retains the process for moving the line. So as it stands, an adjustment or an expansion, I should say, of 30 acres or fewer can be approved by the Board of Supervisors by a 4/5 vote after making one of 7 very difficult to make findings. And an expansion exceeding 30 acres requires that process plus another ballot measure. So that's what E and F here are going over. We're retaining those processes. Also, G is part of that process. H, we did tweak the findings, though, those 7 findings to adjust the line. Some of the language from 2006 was just very difficult to interpret at times. Some of it just needed updating, the terminology and such. But the main thing we did was we added findings related to a potential expansion around Byron Airport. And also, there was nothing in the ballot measure specifically about contractions and how do you contract the line and findings that needed to be made. So we added those. So the ballot measure continues the protections for prime agricultural land in the county, specifically the area between Brentwood and Discovery Bay, known as the agricultural core, retains the 40-acre minimum lot size there, maintains the county's eligibility to receive those return to source funds from CCTA. And then this slide is all of the adjustments, a quantification of the adjustments. So, I'll round it here, about 3,500 acres being moved outside the line because of permanent development restrictions, about 1,500 acres moved outside because it's buffers around subdivisions, refineries, cemeteries, uses of that nature. 4,400 acres moved outside the line because of constraints like high and very high fire hazard zones, steep slopes, flood hazards, etc. And then we get into some tweaks. So we moved some land in and some land out to align with city limits. We moved some in and some out to simplify the line along the county shoreline. The 2006 measure has the line kind of going along every nook and cranny of the shoreline, and we simplified that. And then there is some development outside the line that we wanted to bring in, some existing development. So there's 130 acres moving inside for that, and 129 moving inside because it just changes that have happened over the years. Annexations by different cities have created some unusual little fragments and pockets in the line that just doesn't really make sense to have them outside the line anymore when it's when it's an area completely surrounded by land inside the line. So this is a map showing it all. So and I should say there's the Board of Supervisors December 9th, 2025 hearing, there's a map set of about 50 maps where you can go in, and if you're interested in any specific adjustment, you can take a look at it. I have an example on the next slide, but this puts everything together, showing all the different colors. They represent all those categories in the previous slide. They have the acreages there, and it's about a net contraction of 9,500 acres. Most of that land is essentially unbuildable. And so, I'll point out some examples here on the map. You see up in the top right corner, Bethel Island. It's below sea level. Nearly the entire island is below sea level. And accordingly, we put nearly the entire island outside the urban limit line in the ballot measure. Also on the far right side, you see a dark green spot there. That's about 500 acres that's permanently conserved in an agricultural conservation easement. Off of Pittsburgh's coast, there's an island that was inside the line before, putting outside. It's a delta island. It's not being developed. And so you see how much green is here. There is a lot of contraction, but it is land that really wasn't going to be built on anyway. Here's an example so you can see. And again, there's a whole series of maps that look like this. So I just chose Byron because for a couple reasons. One, it has contractions and expansions, and it also shows that potential expansion area at the airport that Measure A would pre-authorize the Board of Supervisors to go over the 30-acre limit to expand there, specifically for the purpose of economic development supporting Byron Airport. So we're back to the existing line, and I wanted to toggle back and forth so we can see the line as it stands today and then the line that would exist if Measure A were to pass. So you can see, those areas I talked about, say Bethel Island, if you look up there in the top right, most of it's inside here. Most of it would go out. That ag conservation easement in Discovery Bay, in and out. Byron Airport, it contracts around there. A lot of the land around the airport is actually owned by the county or the East Bay Regional Park District as conservation land. So you see in and out. So it's changes like that all over the place. The island off Pittsburgh, in and out. So this is the line as it would appear if Measure A were to pass. And then as far as development capacity goes, doing this right on the heels of the general plan was very fortunate because we just looked at all of the unincorporated land and its development capacity. And so the general plan itself and the EIR that accompanies it, it looked at or analyzed the impacts that you see here: 23,200 new homes, 65,600 new residents, million square feet of new commercial development, and 5 million square feet of new industrial space. And that's all capacity that exists inside the line and would continue to exist inside the line if Measure A were to pass. So that's it. There's my contact information. And Meg, I will send this to you. I know I didn't beforehand, in case anyone would like to get in touch with me. And that is all I have to share with you. And I'd be happy to answer your questions.
All right. Who has questions for Will? Again, not political, but sort of on the technical and the line and everything. Man, this group usually isn't
Yeah,
shy.
I'll ask
Go
it a
ahead.
question. Um, this is a very broad question. If this were to pass, what makes you excited about an extension of the ULL? Is it like from the county perspective, what would be exciting about this and benefits for the county?
I don't think it's exciting. I think it actually maintains the status quo. The line has been with us for 36 years now. It would extend it another quarter century, and it really just is consistent with what has been happening.
So you don't see it as like removing a barrier that currently exists to development that would be easier to permit if this were to happen?
I thought you asked it if it continued. If it continued, there wouldn't be any change to land
But
use
like in
regulation.
terms of so you were saying like the benefits of the general plan, they already evaluated this, and then this is sort of bringing that in line with the general plan assumptions for development and making things sort of in your mind consistent with what's already happening. Um, but in terms of the development potential, what this might mean when people are looking at properties that will be within the urban limit line, do you feel like that is going to be beneficial for or excite really anything, or do you think this is a nothing burger, or do you feel like this will be helpful in the development world?
I think that it has become so much a part of land use planning in Contra Costa County that I mean we have it's been around for more than a generation now. And so it's almost as if it's starting to get to the point where there are few people in the development industry who remember life without it. And so that's what I mean by the status quo. It's just, it is what it is. The land that's inside the line is what's open for urban development. The land that's outside the line is not open for urban development. And it's just sort of the ground rules for how things are in Contra Costa County. And I should say, you can develop outside the urban limit line. You just can't develop with urban intensity uses. The county allows subdivisions of four or fewer units. The county allows all sorts of agricultural uses outside the line. It's not that it stops development outside the line, it stops a certain level of intensity of development outside the line.
Will, I'd like to ask sort of another way along that same question line. What happens if this fails?
If it fails, it'll be on the ballot again in November to start. But there's a reason it's on in June. But so if it were to fail, the urban limit line is still part of the county general plan and zoning code.
Okay.
So there are certain things about it that would go away, like um, some of the procedural things, but there would still be an urban limit line in county planning. What would happen though is it would lose teeth. Like it would become like the 30 acre limitation, for example, would not exist anymore. You'd still have to do a general plan amendment to change this land outside the line to an urban use, and you'd still have to do a general plan amendment to move it because it's part of the general plan. And we also put some policies in the general plan as sort of a backstop, considering that is a possibility that a ballot measure could fail. So like there is policy language that talks about not about buffering the line, about improving the efficient or I'm sorry, the effectiveness of the line. So it's not as though if the ballot measure failed, then poof, it would just be open season on land outside the line. People would still need to come to the county to get general plan amendments and to move the line in the county general plan. And so the board of supervisors would still be able to approve or deny those just like any other general plan amendment. But there are certain procedural aspects that wouldn't exist anymore.
Okay, that's great. Who else has questions, comments? Matt?
Yeah. So for just so if a city wants to expand their urban limit line, they could be expanding into a area that you already have identified as within your urban limit line, so that would be okay. But if they try to expand into an area that is not within your line, that would set off some of those requirements you were specifying. Is that
So the cities each adopted, they were given a deadline by Measure J back in 2004. And they had to have a voter approved urban limit line, I believe, by April 1st, 2009. So what 16 of the 19 did was adopt the county's line as it applied to them as their line. There are three cities, Antioch, Pittsburgh, and San Ramon, that have their own urban limit line that is completely unassociated with what happened with the county's line in '06. They're just their own voter approved lines. So, but they adopted them only for the line as it applies to their city and as it existed on election day 2006. So, for one, moving the county's line doesn't move their line, and they have their own procedures for adjusting their line. Now, we also have the local agency formation commission that is the entity approving or denying annexations, right? So, for a city to move its urban, I mean, cities can annex, and we have agreements with them, and up to a certain dollar amount, tax value for annexations. So, they can annex, and then they'd have to go through their procedures to change their line. And then you might just have overlapping lines. And like with anything else in planning, none of our land use regulations apply in the city. None of their land use regulations apply in our jurisdiction. So you might just have some quirks of the map where you have the line. And that's actually one of the reasons we one of those categories of adjustments was to align generally with city limits, because it's just confusing to people when you have these misaligned lines.
Yeah. Matt, Kelly, I see you nodding a lot because I know you're involved from CCTA and the Measure J. Was there anything you wanted to add? Not to call you out on the spot.
I think Will covered all the highlights and points that concern CCTA. So, yeah, great, and just want to thank the county and Will for all the work they've done on this over the years and for this effort. Amazing amount of work.
Awesome. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Meg, do we want to just maybe highlight some of the ideas for the next committee meetings and get input?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Let me pull up that list. And if anyone has any other questions, feel free to chime in. Actually, I have a question really quick. I'm kind of curious if you could tell us a little bit more about the process that you go through at the county for determining the line. Like, what does that process look like from a planning perspective?
So I mentioned that in the measure, so Measure L contains criteria for putting land outside the line, and we modified that with Measure A. So really, there are various factors. I could bring it up, but we look at things nowadays, especially high fire hazard, right? So like physical constraints is one, and these kind of match up to those colors on the map, the greens. So high fire danger, flood zones, prime ag land or productive agricultural land, habitat areas, that sort of thing. Generally would be outside the line. Permanent restrictions on development. So that means lands owned by the East Bay Regional Park District or Mount Diablo, lands owned by, maybe by land trusts, lands protected by conservation easements, or where the development rights have been deeded to the county. Those outside the line. And really, because we want the line to, in some ways, reflect what is realistically developable, right? We don't want there to be large swaths of land, flat land next to a community that someone looks at and says, oh, wow, you could put 500 houses there, when in fact it's actually protected in perpetuity by a conservation easement. So, those are the big buckets, really, looking at putting land outside the line? Is it permanently protected, or does it have some sort of severe development constraint? Another one is really steep slopes. So I'm summarizing, but that's the general thinking. We also, there are places that don't align with what I just said. Like, there are large regional parks inside the line, right? And we also don't want the line to just be this completely absurd looking diagram, right? Where we're trying to put every single protected piece of land outside. It's protected, it's in a city or something like that, or on the edge. Okay, fine. And then those little one-off sort of islands or fragments that I was talking about, it would just be you'd start getting into sort of these cartographic issues if you just had these little pock marks all over the place, right? So, not to mention the fact that when you look at the general purpose of it is to contain sprawl. So having these little things in that are completely surrounded by communities anyway doesn't really make sense to take them out. So that's some of the general consideration.
Yeah, no, that's all really helpful. So some upcoming topics that we're looking at are a meeting focused on Plan Bay Area 2050, as well as the Bay Area Air District and impacts on permitting. And then beyond that, we're going to have a meeting focused on some November ballot measures, including the CEQA reform one. So we've got a lot of interesting topics coming up. We're working on speakers for all of those. If anybody has any ideas that they want to share on topics that we cover, I have there's an intake form as well for that, which I can send in the chat. That are, that can help us, decide on new topics. If you are interested in anything in particular you think this committee should cover, please let us know. Jared, do you have anything to add to any of that? I can pull up that form.
No, and we'll let everybody go here in a minute. I would just say that SQL reform is going to be a big issue. It goes into a lot of stuff that we have talked about in terms of streamlining housing, as well as more power on the grid and everything. So I'm looking forward to that topic. But other than that, if you have topics or questions, Megan and I can hang out for another minute, but I think we're good today and letting everybody go. So thank
Yeah.
you guys for coming, and Will, thank you for an awesome presentation.